Hey there, everybody. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Ranking the Albums. Today, we've got in the co-captain's chair. Actually, no, today he is the captain of this ship today, Mr. Steven Reid, all the way from Scotland. Greetings, my friend. How you doing?
I am doing very well indeed, Peter. We are doing the catalogue of Magenta today, so a Welsh progressive rock band who I think seem to have had an awful lot more love than we maybe anticipated. They are a great band. I love them. But we have been requested this quite a lot, haven't we?
Yeah, quite a lot. And I've always kind of either not answered or given like a little sheepish reply because I think I've only ever owned two or listened to two Magenta. I think I have two Magenta CDs, and I don't even know exactly how many albums they have. So I've not been one who could do something like that. But then when I found out that you were pretty well versed in the catalog, I finally relented. I said, you know what? Why not just let Steven rank the albums? I don't need to. I'll just kind of sit here and look ridiculous like I normally do and let you have a go at it. And so that's what we're going to do today. So I'm just going to kind of you know, I'm going to steer the ship while Steven shouts the commands, and we'll do that. But before we do that, because I should have done it on the What's Hot with Sea Tranquility episode before, and hopefully if you watch it, if you haven't, you should go watch it, and you'll know you're going to see this, and you're probably going to want to go check it out. So one of the albums that I talked about that I reviewed on the previous episode was the new album from the Rick Ray band called Acrylic Charlie, and I mentioned that Rick and his band have like 35 albums over the last bunch of years. And just in case you thought I was kidding, Rick was kind enough to send this to me in with the shipment. I should have showed it then, but this is the list of all of Rick's albums released since 1999. So that's 35 albums in what, 22 years? That's a lot of albums.
That's a lot of albums.
That's a lot of albums. And I'm going to post this in the other video, but you can get any of these CDs directly from Neurosis Records, which is Rick's own record label, for $7 each, and that includes postage. So I'll drop that information in the other video. But I just wanted to show everybody that because that's pretty impressive.
That's prolific.
Yeah, that is definitely prolific. So, all right, back to Magenta there. Sorry for the
yes. And with you saying that you weren't sure exactly how many albums that you are, you'll be pleased to hear that I'm covering all 72 of the releases, Peter. No, sorry, 8. There's only 8.
I was like,
so yeah, 8 studio albums that are little extra releases. They've done quite a few EPs, quite a few long singles. The latest album came with a kind of companion disc that you could buy together or buy separately. They've got lots of really good live albums, which arguably are better than some, maybe most of the studio catalogue. I'm not covering any of that. We're keeping it pure. It's the 8 studio albums that we're going to talk about. So who are Magenta? Magenta are a Welsh, mainly symphonic prog rock band. There are other elements in there, as it is with most symphonic rock, it has to be said, or prog rock, should I say. But that's kind of the core of it. If you wanted to pick out a main influence, I could be unfair and say Yes. And I say unfair because musically they sound a little bit like Yes. But in terms of guitar work, an awful lot of it sounds very much like Steve Howe, both in the phrasing and the tones, the sound. So it's obviously intentional because in many ways it feels like they've almost gone out of their way to do that. But it's not on every album. It's not on every song. And certainly musically, there's an awful lot more going on than mere homage, which it's clear that they do like them. None less than having a female singer in Christina Booth. She started off as Christina Murphy, married somewhere along the line in the catalogue. The band was formed by Robert Reid, who was in Cyan prior to that. He's also in Chimpan A, Compendium. He's done solo work. And it is his brother, Steven Reid, different spelling, no relation, who writes the lyrics and concepts for the band. So they formed 2001, around about there, 2000, 2001. Started off really just as a duo, well, a trio with Steven doing the concepts of Robert and Christina, and it has grown into a band from there. And Chris Fry is the guitarist, he was a kind of guest guitarist early on, but he's become one of the core trio that has then moved into a 5-piece in the last couple of albums. So that's where they come from. That's who they are. 8 albums to talk about, and I will start with 2011's Chameleon. So this was the band's 5th album. A lot of the cover art isn't very prog rock, it has to be said. The logo isn't there. The logo's a bit naff there, which loses points for me anyway, but we're talking about the music. Yeah, I know. We're talking about the music here. And I would say that this is probably Magenta's most straight ahead album. They have an awful lot of long songs. They sometimes have as few as 3 songs on an album, or they have long kind of suites where there's maybe 16 songs on an album, but it's only really 4. That's not what's going on Chameleon. This is perfectly accessible, I would say. It's a really good album, but it's not where I would start. This is just, I don't know. I mean, Glitterball on it is a hard-hitting opener. That's a really, kind of grab you sort of track. You've got Red, which builds really well. Robert Reid is an excellent keyboard player, and it clicks in really nicely with the vocals. And Christina Booth is versatile. She's often quite ethereal in her delivery. There's a lot of vibrato in there, but she doesn't rely on those things. She can be a bit Kate Bush at times, and sometimes she can just be a really forceful rock singer. Very versatile, but this is, I would say, much more kind of straight ahead. There is good stuff on here. Turn the Tide is excellent. The Beginning of the End. So there's not a bad album in this entire catalogue, but Chameleon just ranks at number 8 for me.
Yeah, that's a pretty lousy logo.
Yeah, the cover's not great, and it gets even less exciting inside, it has to be said. So yeah, as an album, it doesn't lack inspiration. That would be unkind, but as a package, it doesn't do very much for me. The Magenta catalogue is, I would say, remarkably consistent. So I will be very intrigued to see how much people agree or disagree with me in the comments. This is one of these ones where I'm definitely going to be scrolling down and through to see, are there the sweet spots that I think there are, because I think there are sweet spots. I think that the top 2 especially, maybe even a joint number 1 to give a bit of a spoiler, but the top 2 or 3 I think probably rank up there for most Magenta fans. Set myself up for a fall there though, haven't I? So number 7 is Home. Okay, excuse the light in here today. As I've said in the previous video we did, it's actually sunny in Scotland today, and it's completely ruined the light in this room. So we're not used to it here, so we don't quite know what to do when it is. A little bit more inspired inside. We've got little maps and various things. Okay,
and that logo isn't bad.
Yeah, that logo's not bad, it has to be said. There's a little bit of thought. And this is a re-release version that I've got here. So Home was initially conceived as a 2-disc album, and then there was what's known as the New York suite in the middle of it, which was removed to make it into a more accessible 1-disc album. Now, I do have the 1-disc, and I haven't pulled it out because I must admit I never really listened to it, because I probably bought that album not knowing that part of the story. And I've always felt like the album's a little bit of a compromise. It doesn't flow in the way that the best Magenta albums do. And since then, I believe that there's been a release where it was added as an EP, what was removed, and then it's been reinstated entirely. I think you need to hear it reinstated to kind of make sense of it to some extent. But even at that, this is an album that, I don't know, it lacks for a little bit of cohesion. But there's lots and lots to like. I think that Joe, which is not the best song title in the world, but it's 11 minutes long, that is probably as yes-ish as the band get. But The Visionary, Journey's End, The Traveller's Lament, and Home itself really show the strength of this band. I mean, we're talking about number 7 in an 8-album catalogue, and I listened to this the other day and thought it was really, really strong. So, if you've never heard Magenta, I wouldn't be frightened really to start anywhere, but Home just doesn't quite hit home for me in the same way that some of the other stuff does. Didn't plan that, sorry.
It worked out that way, right? Yeah.
It worked out that way, yeah. So, number 6, we're going right back to the start. This is Revolutions, right back to 2001. I would say that this is maybe as obviously symphonic prog as Magenta have ever been. There's strong Yes influences. I'll promise to try and stop mentioning them quite so much. as we move on. ELP, there's elements of that in here. Genesis, which is no great surprise, I suppose, considering the starting point. And Renaissance, that, I mean, the female vocals kind of help with that a little bit. And Christina Booth can be quite intentionally airy with her vocals, you know, quite dreamy in a way. And that also kind of helps with that sort of reference too. Rob Reid, who's kind of, he's not the co-vocalist in the band, but you do hear him sing quite a lot throughout the catalogue. I don't think he's there yet in terms of a vocalist on this album. And that's probably why it doesn't rank higher, because musically it's really, really strong, I have to say. And same again with when a 2-disc, they don't do much by halves, Magenta. I mean, some of their albums are 50 minutes, so they're not all big sprawling epics, but we're back in 2-disc territory here. Technically 4 songs, but there's 13 tracks on disc 2, and there is 10 on disc 1. My own sweet spot on this one is The White Witch. So that's 20 minutes and 23, and broken down into Overture, The White Witch, The Plague, Reflection, and Dispel. But really, from start to finish, if you like symphonic prog, you're going to like this, it has to be said. And from here on in, I'm now beginning to split hairs already. Still 5 to talk about, and splitting them is going to be really, really tough. So, what does split them, though, is Metamorphosis. So
I have that one.
you have that one. So what did you think of that one, Peter? Is that an album that has stuck with you?
I like it. Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, because to me, this is, I would argue, one of the less Magenta-like albums. It's a bit harsher, a bit more in your face. I like the album artwork there, I have to say.
Yeah,
that's very cool indeed. The original album was split into 4 tracks. There's a re-release with bonus tracks, which come highly recommended. I mean, you've got 2 really long songs. So you've got the Ballad of Samuel Lane, and you've got the title track itself. And then you've got, Prekastolin, excuse my pronunciation of that, which is 3 minutes and 43, and Blind Faith, which is 6 minutes and 1, with the 2 longer ones both being over 20 minutes. So not the longest album in the world, you're around about the 50-minute mark, but it is really, I think, quite a challenging album, considering the kind of style of music that we're talking about here, and a very cohesive album. There are a lot of albums that are about the sort of length that you think, oh, I could add more of that. And it's not that I wouldn't want more of this, but it doesn't need it. It says what it needs to say, and it's really, I just think the album joins together from start to finish in a really clever kind of fashion. But yeah, I would say that there's elements on here, maybe more out-and-out riffs than you would anticipate from a Magenta album. It is kind of represented as well. Again,
spots. Yeah,
it's heavy in spots, and it has to be said that Magenta aren't always like that. There's an awful lot of that is definitely much more restrained than that. I listen to this a lot. I arguably listen to a lot more, or not a lot more, but a little bit more than some of the stuff I've ranked higher. But when I listen to them to actually rank the albums, it doesn't really hold all of the kind of Magenta hallmarks in the same way. So it kind of fell a little bit down the list. And that's why I'm saying I'm beginning to split hairs a little bit here, because this is great. This is a really good album. And it certainly falls in a sweet spot that both you and I like.
Well, I remember when I first started listening to that one, it kind of reminded me, again, not like it sounds like it, but it reminds me of some of those heavier arena albums. It's almost like they were kind of going for that vibe, right?
Yeah.
Still really progressive and symphonic, but the muscular guitar work seems to be coming to the forefront quite a bit more.
Yeah. And that's not something that really was there too much before this. And it's not something that's been there too much after this. And that maybe is why I but haven't ranked that higher than that. As I say, I put all of these albums on again a few times over the last couple of weeks, just to kind of cement what I wanted to say. And I love it. I really love it. It's really strong, but it's not very Magenta. And that's why, to me, this is the Magenta album I would want to hear when I'm not necessarily in the mood for Magenta. It's a bit of a double negative there, because it's great. So top 4, so we're in the top 50% now. So 2011's the 27 Club, okay? So the 27 Club is those famous artists and musicians who died at the age of 27 and were covered there through 6 different songs. This one also comes with a DVD with a different mix of 5.1, which is excellent, and a really good documentary. An awful lot of documentaries of making of albums and things that come as a bonus disc. It's maybe 20 minutes of fluff in a studio. This is, I think, over an hour long and has been watched a few times. It's well worth getting involved with. And definitely, as they've moved through, they've upped their game with the visuals as well. This is an excellent album. It's much more fun than it sounds. I mean, talking about, you know, artists who died at that age could be construed as being a little bit of a melancholy kind of idea, but there's a huge amount of variety on here, as you would expect when we're covering the Lizard King, which, I mean, I'll be honest with you and say, have I looked into who that all covers? Not really. The music is where I'm at, it has to be said. But yeah, there's a lot of variety here, symphonic elements, some psychedelic parts, and there's some hard rock on here as well. It's kind of hits that point in between some of the albums. And that's the thing, is that quite a lot of the albums, I would say, are, well, this is what we're doing just now, and this is what we're doing just now, and this is what we're doing just now. And this one kind of falls somewhere in the middle in between what they're doing just now. And I like that about it. The vocals on this one are outstanding, really outstanding. There's variety, there's strength, there's fragility, and I think it just shows what a tremendous talent Christina Booth is, really. And that, I would say, in recent years has begun to be recognised a little bit more, and that's maybe on the back of this album. I don't know, because we're only, where are we, 8 years ago with this.
Yeah.
I really like the 27 Club, but then again, I really like everything from here on in.
So as someone who hasn't heard that album, I have not heard it. I think that's a great concept. So is lyrically all of the album kind of almost like a tribute to, we know who the usual suspects are with the 27.
Yes.
So basically Jimmy, Janice, Jim, and, you know,
Yeah,
Brian.
absolutely. What you tend to find with most Magenta albums is they shy away from calling them concept albums because there's not a story.
Right.
They don't just start with a beginning, a middle, and an end and tell you this fantastic tale. They tend to, or Steven Reid tends to choose an idea and then base all the songs around that idea without necessarily having to make them into a story.
So it's more theme driven and not like
yes,
concept driven, right? Yeah.
Much more theme driven, yes, absolutely. But that's exactly what, as you say, what you've put into words that I was trying to. Yes, the songs are about individual artists who died at that age. And the songs, do they musically reflect those artists? Not really.
Okay.
I wouldn't have said. I mean, you wouldn't suddenly think, well, that's the Doors, do you know? But there's elements of that, I suppose, maybe more in the energy of the songs themselves. But I think that's a fan favourite. And then I think I don't know if We Are Legend is or not. It seems to have split the fans a little bit. You've only got 3 songs here: Trojan, Colours, and Legend. Legend itself comes from the sci-fi novel I Am Legend, and that's a little bit more neo in the way that it's constructed, neo-prog in the way that it's constructed. I would say that it's another strong guitar album. Chris Fry is absolutely fantastic on this album, and a little bit more of a David Gilmour influence in places on here than you would hear in an awful lot of the catalogue. And rightly or wrongly, Magenta don't appear to be very shy of kind of going, well, you know, actually it's going to sound like that, so it's going to sound a bit like that on this album. But I can accept it in a way that you can't with some bands. There's a lot of bands that do things like that, and you just think, oh, it's just a second-rate version of this or a second-rate version of that. But for Magenta, they really kind of just, you can tell they believe in what they're doing musically, do you know? And if it fits for the song, well, it fits for the song. And that's why they're doing it. They're not doing it because that's who they want to sound like for this album, or they've been inspired by this producer or whatever it may be. Because I mean, Robert Reid is making it all sound the way that it sounds, and it's just a really clever album, I think. I mean, you've got a 25-minute song, a 10-minute song, and an 11-minute song, but there's so many different parts and pieces within those. But unlike some of the albums that have got little suites where it's obvious where one section is moving to another, I mean, they've got a 25-minute song here that is one complete song that revisits areas without repeating itself. It's very clever in that sense. Colours centres around Van Gogh and is much more classic and traditional in its kind of prog values. And Trojan, to me, as I say, 25 minutes, it's Robert Reid maybe at his best synth-wise, really out there, doing a whole variety of different things with it. And it's just a really strong album from beginning to end. Really like that.
Yeah, it's funny. I wasn't aware of just how many epic tracks this band like has done on their albums.
Yeah.
It's almost like they're out flowering the Flower Kings here, you know?
Yeah, there's an element of that. It's funny, but I don't know, because with the Flower Kings, it sometimes seems to me like they are going, here's the epics, you know, we're doing an epic. And I don't feel like that with Magenta. I think if you put on, for example, you know, We Are Legend, it doesn't necessarily feel like here's the long song. I mean, I know there's 3 long songs, but they kind of structure that in a way where you don't really notice how long the songs are. Do you know, there are some albums out there that have maybe got 2 or 3 short songs and 1 song, and you kind of think, well, the 2 or 3 short songs are just kind of there. Do you know, what we cared about was that one. Yeah. And Magenta never feels like that. They feel like very cohesive albums. And it's a skill, I think, that not everybody can pull out of the bag. So I'm going to confuse a lot of people now, because Masters of Illusion, okay, so that's my #1 album from last year, and it also made it into our recent 90s onwards UK prog primer that we did. Well, it's not quite at the top of this list. I have said that this is a joint #1, and it probably is a joint #1, because Masters of Illusion is just really quite outstanding. So we've got another theme here, and the theme this time is that we're talking about some of the great original kind of horror actors, is what the theme is here. So you've got Bela, obviously Bela Lugosi, and it's just, they seem to have given all of those, there's 6 songs on this one, and they've given it that kind of feel. There's a darkness about them, but also a kind of naivety about it that you can see in those kind of films. But it's actually about the actors as opposed to the characters or the films. It's a completely different take on it. And we've expanded out into a threefold. And you can kind of see the kind of darkness that they're trying to portray in the actors that portrayed very dark characters, you know?
I mean, you talk about Bela Lugosi, and I've talked about him a lot on this channel on the Monsters Den show. I mean, you know, Bela was a pretty troubled guy. As great as an actor as he was, I mean, and I'm a huge fan. I've read books on him, so I'm highly intrigued with this one. And I should have bought this after we spoke about it, you know, back a little bit ago. So who else did they tackle on this album?
So let me see. I don't actually know if it tells you inside exactly who they're covering. I'm not very good at that side of things, Peter. That has to be said. So I like lyrics. Anyone that reads my reviews will know I'm not necessarily a lyrics guy.
I'm not either, so
right? So I love to know who's singing, and I love a great voice. And the lyrics are good in the sense that there's quite a lot of hooks and sing-along moments that you get that you wouldn't necessarily expect on all symphonic prog albums. And this is them really right back to where they started musically, I would suggest. This is a symphonic prog album. And I'm maybe not quite as involved in the concept as I think somebody like yourself, who's got a really strong background in the kind of horror genre, would be, which is maybe why you've asked that question, and quite embarrassingly I can't answer.
No, well, you know what? Read me the track listings. Maybe something will ring a bell.
So the track list is, you've got Bela, then you've got A Gift from God, Reach for the Moon, Snow, The Rose, and Masters of Illusion. So it's not giving away in the titles as to who it is that they're talking about.
Yeah, not at all.
Yeah. But it is about specific actors. That's the theme that they've gone for. That's
I bet you if I were to read the lyrics, I might be able to figure it out. But the song titles don't give anything away.
They don't give a great deal. But I think in many ways we're also more in the theme and the area and the feel of it. I mean, you've got like Set Me Free typed on that bit of paper that you probably can't see in the light that I've got here. But it certainly, it captures a mood and it captures a feel, this album, and it's remarkably fragile for what can be, I suppose, quite harrowing topics that we're covering here. Do you know? And that's what struck me, is it's maybe not an album for all occasions. As I said, my favorite album from last year, so I listened to this a lot. but it's not upbeat, but you can sing along with it. It's not happy, but it's got choruses. Do you know, and I kind of like that, you know, contradiction in terms. And I do think that Magenta hang things together in a way that is just really natural and flowing and very engaging, I would suggest. So A Gift from God has got a guest vocal from John Mitchell, who we know from just about every UK prog band there's ever been.
Yeah.
That's not quite true. It Bites, Arena, Frost, Lonely Robot.
Post 90s.
Yeah, post 90s. Yeah, I can keep going, but I won't. And you've also got Troy Donockley on The Rose. Yeah, so that's the kind of mood and feel that we're getting there. And let's be honest, Troy Donockley may well have been in more albums in the last 20 years than anybody else.
Yeah.
Anywhere. Need a pipe, Troy's a man. But yeah, I just think that this is a really strong album where the music and the lyrics, although I can't tell you who it's all about, just click together in a way that is just really quite sublime. And it's made a real impact on me. I've spoken about it on I think this is maybe the third show that I've spoken about this album at quite some length. And it's worth it, in my opinion. And yet, there's another one to come. So, number one, same again, apologies, we can't really see what I'm showing today. This is 7 from 2004. Okay, so the 7 referred to here are gluttony, envy, lust, greed, anger, pride, and sloth. So we're in the 7 deadly sins here. Yet again, we're in quite dark lyrical territory, not very cheerful in that sense. And yet, this is an upbeat album, do you know? But they represent what they're talking about without just having to, you know, sort of wallow in some sort of morose pity and greed and envy. But you understand what I mean, is they do seem able to kind of convey these emotions and ideas without just going, well, you know, it's got to be, you know, grimy and dirty because we're talking about the 7 deadly sins. Yeah. I mean, Pride itself is almost Elton John meets the Beach Boys at certain points, maybe just in the intro to be fair, but Chris Fry guitars is outstanding on that song. It's a little jazzy in places with the keyboards, an amazing amount of variety on here. Gluttony's got just some fantastic vocal arrangements. And I mean, I keep going on about Christina Booth and how good she is, but she's that good. She's worth going on about. And yet the guitars are still remarkably Stephen Howe-like on that song. So, you know, it's just a great album. And it's one, as I say, I kind of started this journey again through Magenta thinking, well, I've raved so much about Masters of Illusion that I'm going to have to put that at number one because, well, I'm going to have to put it at number one. I've put it in for number one from last year. I've put it in, you know, the 90s top 20. And yet I couldn't quite push this out of the way. So I'm going to tell you that on one day it'll be this. It will be Masters of Illusion. And on a different day, it will be 7. And today, I may well go back and listen to them both again, because I could listen to this catalogue over and over and over, as I have done in recent times, and never kind of thought to myself, I need to get this finished. It's probably why it's taking so long for us to put this together, because we've been speaking about this for a few weeks now, and I keep saying, not quite ready, Peter, I'm not quite ready, Peter, because I think I'll just give Metamorphosis another listen and see, you know, can I get it in that top 4? And as we always say, this ranking could change again tomorrow, to be fair, but I would stand by, personally, my top 3 of Masters of Illusion, 7, and We Are Legend. And I think they cover quite a lot of the bases that this band are capable of mastering without ever repeating themselves, but still, with maybe one album exception, sounding remarkably cohesive from the beginning of the catalogue until now, whilst never getting to a stage where you think, well, as some bands can, well, I've got 7 of their albums, I don't need the 8th one. You know, when the 8th one was released, I was like, nope, that's pre-ordered. That will be arriving on the day of release because I need to hear that. So, yeah, I don't know if they're underrated. I think they maybe are. I don't think they quite get the coverage that they've deserved. I think they're beginning to. But yeah, that's the 8 albums of Magenta. Excellent from start to finish. 7 is my number 1, along with Masters of Illusion, which is also my number 1. Am I allowed to do that? I don't know, but there you go.
I do it all the time, so you're absolutely you're allowed. So, I mean, you've made me want to go and I shouldn't say revisit, because most of those albums I've never heard. So, but I'm intrigued. Like I said, what I've heard, I've really liked. They're just one of those bands that I just never went any further with. And I think that's, shame on me, I guess. But it's funny because so many people are really into, like, I hate to use this term, but the female fronted prog or even metal stuff is very popular now. So you would think, knowing all that a band like Magenta would get a little bit more exposure. And for anybody watching who's never really listened to this band but loves that kind of symphonic rock or prog and loves female vocals, I mean, Christina is amazing.
Yeah, isn't she?
Really good. And this
Yeah, I mean, I can't recommend them highly enough, Peter. I do think they're beginning to get a little bit more recognition, but I must admit that the new album came out with very little fanfare. They didn't get a huge amount of coverage. I don't know where they ranked on other people's kind of end of year lists and various things, but it was an album that grabbed me right from the off, Masters of Illusion, and has stuck with me since. And as I say, I put it on. I listened to the other 7 because I've listened to Masters of Illusion so much in the last 12 months or so that I kind of thought, well, I kind of know that. I don't need to. And then I found that I wanted to. I got to the end of the other 7 and I did listen to them all 3 or 4 times because I thought, actually, I'm really enjoying this so much. I need to listen to them again. And then I found myself with Masters of Illusion just kind of going, I really want to listen to that again. And I think having, raved about it again this afternoon, I'm probably going to go and listen to it as soon as we finish this as well, because I really like it. And as I say, then all the 7. So, if you like symphonic prog and you haven't heard them, I would encourage anyone to give them a shot. You like what you've heard. I think they're right in your wheelhouse, Peter. I think that you'll really, really, certainly the top 2, start with those, and if they grab you, I think you'll like it all, I have to say.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna do. As soon as we get off this, I'm gonna go into my little Amazon cart. I have like an order ready to go, and I'm like, all right, let's see how many Magenta albums I can get. I'm ready to pre-order that new Frost album that's coming up in a couple of weeks, which leads us into a little bit of a business here. So we've been asked also many times, almost as much as Magenta, when we're going to rank the Frost album. So of course, there's not that many of those, but we've held off because there's a new one coming out in like
next month, yeah, a couple of weeks time.
So and personally, I've never owned any Frost albums, so I am in the process of getting the ones I know. I've heard a couple of them. I've just never owned them. But now, like 1 or 2 of them are like out of print.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be one. I'm pretty sure there's one of the 3 current ones that is completely out of print. I think the other 2 I can get, and then I'm going to get the new one. So I'll just have to re-listen to that other one. But we'll be doing a ranking the albums of Frost. Probably going to have to give us at least a week or 2 after the new one comes out, I would think.
Yeah.
Right? At least. So
I've heard the new one.
Oh, you have? And?
I've heard the new one. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
It's right up there.
I mean, I have it sitting it's in my inbox, so I have no excuse to not listen to it. But sometimes I wait till I get the hard copy in, and I'm like, but I may just.
I usually do. I couldn't with Frost.
All right, so I should probably do that. Yeah, like I said, I stare at it every time I go through my list of promos in my inbox. I'm like, oh yeah. So that's coming, and as we announced on the previous show today, Steven's going to work up a Thunder album ranking for everybody here too, a band that I have no experience with whatsoever, but I'm highly intrigued, and I think I'm going to take Steven's advice and go out and get the first album and the most recent, see what I think, and go from there. So that's
just
coming up.
For anyone that hasn't watched the last one, it's Thunder, the UK band, because there is also a US band that were called Thunder, which have no sound.
Oh, there is this
Thunder as well.
It makes things even more confusing. Okay.
Yeah, makes it more.
So Thunder, the UK band. Everybody's been
Thunder, the UK band. Yeah.
Thunder, the UK band. So all that's coming up. So stay tuned for all of that and more. And we're going to get Steven back also in May for, in addition to all that, another kind of all review show where we each come with 3 or 4 new releases to talk about. There's never a shortage of that. And maybe by then Steven has purchased some additional Cast albums on CD, and we can maybe have a Cast discussion at some point, even though there's 20 albums. I don't even have them all, but we can maybe at some point down the road a ways do like a top 10 albums of Cast or something like that. I don't know. We'll see. So Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. 20 years of Sea of Tranquility is this year in 2021. We're also on Facebook and Twitter. And of course, we're here on YouTube
All the damn time.
So for Steven Reid, I am Pete Pardo. Have a great rest of the weekend, everybody. But don't go anywhere, because tomorrow, that's right, Sunday brunch with Rich Catino. He and I will be ranking the albums of Praying Mantis, amazing new wave of British heavy metal band that maybe not even heavy metal, but they're part of that movement, more of like a kind of really good melodic rock.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's coming up tomorrow. Stay tuned for that. And then, of course, you got the Hudson Valley Squares on Monday, In the Prague Seat on Tuesday, Monsters Den on Thursday, Friday morning at the Funhouse with Martin Popoff on Friday. Whew, I'm tired already. So enjoy your weekend, everybody. For Steven Reid, I am Pete Pardo. Take care.